So today, look, we've got a number of businesses joining us who are already using Teams Voice, looking to enhance that. We've got some who are considering the move. And just as I guess, an overview, the core reasons we see business predominantly moving to Teams Voice is simplicity of user experience, simplicity of management, can be a benefit of cost savings for some businesses as well. And whether that's moving from a legacy solution or, in fact, people have adopted broader collaboration platforms before Microsoft was working the way it was today, some years ago, when that single platform was needed. Things have moved on quite considerably over that time. But natively, it's fair to say that for some businesses, Teams Voice doesn't, out of the box, always meet some of the advanced features they need, either for how they've used to work or been used to working, should I say, or for that matter, how they're looking to transform with the journey they're on. So today, you'll have seen from the invitation, we're covering a few topics: optimizing your team's environment, so how we're going to leverage the Microsoft ecosystem, some advanced features such as exploring contact center capabilities, skills-based routing, CRM integrations, a bit around efficiency and cost saving, of course, a Q&A. And please do ask any questions during the session. We'll answer them in the flow as we can, or we'll come to the end of it and answer that as we sort of wrap up. But look, straight into our first topic, optimizing your team environment. And I think we've done these sessions before, and it's been quite useful just to follow the flow of a call to keep some logic to what we're talking about. And often that is the IVR. So the auto tenant at the beginning of a call that the business gives the users options of how they're going to route it. And Mike, is our sort of in-house Teams expert, I think it's probably the best place to say, if we're just working in a native Teams environment, how does that work for the people that are not familiar with that?
Yeah, it's a really good place to start, because I think probably one of the most common questions I get asked about, using Teams as a voice platform is, can I have call queues? Can I have, auto attendants or IVRs? And very short answer to that is yes, of course you can. And configuration of those, and you can have multi-layered IVRs, you can have voice prompts, queuing messages, lots of greetings, customized music on hold. It's all there and present, and gives you your standard kind of IVR functionality. But is it everything to everyone? And the short answer is probably not. There might be some more advanced features you want in there. You might want to have, complex multi-layered things. You might want to do some more interesting integrations, like checking databases and things like that before routing calls. And at that point, you're running out of options with the native Teams experience. So this is probably a good place to sort of start with, okay, well, what's the answer to kind of wanting to be able to do something just a little bit more complex than your sort of standard? And this is where companies like Luware and Nimbus come in.
Yeah, so that naturally moves over to you, Ollie. So advanced call routing, IVRs. What are you seeing in the market? Why is it someone would opt for that solution to enhance Teams with your solution?
Yeah, so we saw this as an area that we can kind of help users in this space. So if you're just looking to set up some announcements and some auto attendance and kind of go for that set and forget approach, then I think Teams is really gonna serve you well, and it's going to do probably everything you need to do. What we've seen is the demand from kind of supervisors and managers of call queues and different teams who actually are requesting to have a bit more control over that. So by giving them control in an application like Luware Nimbus to be able to design their own announcements, design their own call flows, do some checks on availability of users, then it means that you're not having to give access to those users in the Teams admin center. And it also means that we can build it in a slightly more visual and graphical way to make it a bit more user friendly. So you don't have to be a trained Teams telephony engineer to actually make those changes. So that's where we've kind of seen the value add from the IVR perspective, is giving those tools to managers and supervisors to be able to make those changes. But as I said, if you're just setting up a simple auto attendant and you don't really need to change that, I think Teams call queues and Teams auto attendants are going to serve you well. But if you need to have a bit more flexibility and that's a bit more dynamic and changing, then you might need to look at an application like Nimbus to help give you that.
Yeah, and it's fair to say we've done deployments in both ways, natively and with Luware, and it really does come down to the business needs. And I think visibility and management is quite key, so you can get a lot more visibility, it's fair to say, within Luware real time than you would perhaps natively within Teams, which we'll come on to a bit later around contact center as well. It's probably worth asking a question as well, actually, just to bring a bit of context to this. So a lot of businesses out there integrate with Teams, and it's kind of, I don't think it's a SaaS voice platform that can't today, given the ubiquity of it as a platform and its use cases. Just briefly, how do you guys operate in Microsoft Teams? How is it a bit different, and why is it you chosen that route?
Yeah, sure. So I think that broadly speaking, there are two ways to integrate into Teams. I'd say the majority of vendors out there have their own UCaaS platform. They have their own cloud telephony platform, which sometimes comes with a contact center platform. And they're essentially going to use Teams to deliver the calls, but the intelligence, the call routing is handled in an external telephony platform that's built and managed by that third party. The other way, which we would call the extended model, essentially means that you're keeping the call as a Teams call. Okay, so the call can come in any way that a normal Teams call would. So whether that's by directing or Way to Connect, and we're essentially playing the puppet master for those team calls. So we're keeping the calls Teams calls, but we're adding announcements, we're adding intelligence, we're adding routing options, and then we're also reporting on those calls. But I think the core difference is that the way that we handle this is we keep the calls in Teams the whole time, when other vendors are essentially making in from their external platforms and just using Teams to deliver that call. So I'd say those are the core differences.
That's fantastic, and we'll come on to that when we talk about some of the efficiency of managing platform in that section later on. But okay, so that's the IVR. At least that's a sort of a bird's eye view of the reasons perhaps one would consider that. Moving on to the attendant console, that's the first most likely destination. You know, a receptionist, someone taking multiple calls. Mike, so if we're talking about Teams, what are we providing natively?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, a lot of the questions are out. What does Teams look like when I take a voice call? And the short answer is very similar to taking a normal Teams call. A call comes in, the call window pops up, and you take that PSTN call. And I suppose the biggest difference is just all those buttons you get across the top banner changes somewhat because it's a voice call. So you have things like transfer, we have hold, we have consult transfer, all of those good features. Because it's a collaboration platform, you get some nice features around being able to chat before you put that transfer through, and indeed, you know, sending calls through to voicemail. So all the basics are covered there, really, and there's no reason why any sort of normal office user would need anything more. What we're talking about here is the ability to handle multiple calls at once, being able to sort of dip into present statuses very easily, be able to query things like their Outlook calendar in one interface without taking too much of Ollie's kind of thunder there. Maybe he can sort of give us a description of kind of what's capable with the Nimbus platform at that spot.
Yeah, I think sensible time to move over to yourself, Ollie, the attendant console, you know, where we see it, why people use it, and some use cases.
Yeah, so as Mike mentioned, you can transfer a call in Teams. You can even do consult transfer in Teams. So I think if you're transferring the odd call, maybe 2 or 3 calls a day, then that's absolutely sufficient. What we find from speaking to a lot of reception teams is that those teams have in a legacy world, they're used to having some sort of console, whether that's a physical console or a soft console. And then when they move to Teams, they find a few things that are lacking, or it's just a bit more arduous to actually make those clicks. So we've developed an attendant console which sits natively in Teams. So this gives really good visibility of presence. So you can see all of your colleagues' presence, whether they're available, away, all of the Teams present statuses. You can make notes against calls, against contacts. So I can see, okay, this person's on maternity leave, this person's on annual leave this week. So you can make those notes. And then we also provide lots of different transfer options within one click. So we have a safe transfer option. So if you want to make sure that a person actually answers, or if they don't answer, you get the call back. We have the consultative transfer, and then we also have the blind transfer. But we can access things like mobiles, we can access voicemails from there, and we can also look at calendars. So I can really easily check their Outlook calendar within that single app in Teams to check if they're actually available to handle that call. So really that's designed for those users that are transferring a higher call volume than just those few calls a day.
And it's quite a nice bolt-on, and it's equally not unhelpful to people who take small number of calls, because all that information in one place is incredibly helpful whether you're just taking a few calls a day because it's all consolidated.
Yeah, I think I've heard some companies calling that team like the first impressions, or the head of first impressions, or something a bit corny like that. But I think it is a bit corny. But really, if that is the kind of entry point to your business, it's about how you portray yourself and your business to those incoming, if they are potential incoming customers. Then having those tools available to have that efficient experience can really make a big difference to those people as the kind of gateway to your business.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, the other location or direction a call can take is direct to the user, and this moves nicely onto our sort of CRM integration section. Mike, over to you. It's a sort of the simpler, shorter kind of overview. But what is it we can do natively in Teams with respect to Teams integration, and what might even be coming down the road for that?
Yeah, and I think this it's probably quite common practice for people to integrate the legacy phone systems with some sort of CRM or context database or something similar to sort of identify who the caller is or where they're calling from. It's very handy for to give that sort of personal impression. And with Microsoft Teams, that is available out of the box, assuming you're using some sort of web-based CRM system. Native Teams allows you to sort of provide essentially a URL query and pop to those records. Beyond that, you're a bit stuck, and that's really all you're able to do out of the box.
Okay, so Ollie, over to you. There's obviously an awful lot you can do with integration. This is a big conversation we have with customers around improving workflows, either from the way they were working or very much about transformation, because people are improving databases and CRMs. And voice is a big component of that. So perhaps give us a couple of use cases and examples of how you guys work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So integration, yeah, is a broad topic. I think if we start with the user, and we would use the word context. So what we're aiming to do with Nimbus is give that user some context or some useful context on that incoming caller. So when I answer a call, I think the good question to ask yourself is what's going to be most useful for that user to see about that incoming caller. For some people, it might just be the contact record on the CRM. For others, it might actually be a search of that contact. So you can see any open cases, any open tickets, any open opportunities. So really, it's good to think about what's going to be most useful when I get that call in, so I can handle that call as efficiently as possible. And then once we've handled that call and we've got the right information in front of us, we want to free up the agent away from taking notes, away from making a log of that call, and just give them freedom to actually deliver as much value as possible to that person on the call. So the way we can do that is by automating tasks. So for example, if we get that call, we can create an automated call record. Now with some new tools like transcription, we can actually transcribe that call into that call record. We can take keywords away from that and put those into the call record. So again, it's automating some of those manual processes that the agent might have had. And then if we think about a scenario where perhaps we didn't answer the call, so for whatever reason, the caller maybe had to wait for a couple of minutes in the queue, they gave up patience and then hung up. So we can also create tasks based on that. So any outcome of the call, whether it's an accepted call, a missed call, request of the callback, we can then create a task in the CRM system, and then an automation flow can go off the back of that. So that's kind of on the calling perspective. But also if we loop back to what we were talking about in the IVRs, and Mike mentioned it briefly, you might actually want to try and do some automation at the start of the call before a user has actually accepted that call. So I'm sure you've all had experiences where you enter an account number or an order number or membership ID. So we were working with a logistics company, and they basically told us that 70% of our calls are just people asking for an update on their order. So by taking the order number in the IVR, we can actually pull information from a database or a CRM system and then play the caller back the delivery date and the status of their order. And that basically took a huge amount of those calls away from the agents, and the ones they were dealing with were ones that they could actually add value to. So yeah, a few different areas that we can look at integrating with databases.
And there's a question popped in about call recording. We'll come on to that in a moment. But just on this section, you talked about task allocation, task creation. Adaptive cards is one of my sort of favorite sort of options here, where you can really bespoke quite simply tasks within Teams that go to users. So when you've got important things that are happening or not happening, for example, there's an automated, quite visual way in which you can inform single people, then groups of people, and also cross-collaborate. Do you want to perhaps just touch on that? Because it's something that gets talked about quite a lot, and I think it would be a useful one to quickly touch upon here.
Yeah, adaptive cards. I don't think, as boring as it sounds, I don't think they're talked about enough. So I agree with you, Mark. But essentially, what we can do with an adaptive card is send a prompt to either a Teams channel or to a user with some action. So I'll give you an example. We had a property management company. They basically had 2 or 3 things that they might need to send out after every call. So when a call was connected, we just sent a little card in Teams, so to that person in their Teams chat, which said, okay, finish your call with this user. So there were a few options that we put in for them. One was sending out some generic kind of marketing information. Another one was creating a follow-up task, and another one was creating a meeting which would actually integrate into their booking system in Microsoft. So those were tasks that were kind of customized for them. But whatever tasks that you want your users to do, or you want a team of users to do, it might just be notifying a team of users that somebody's called in, a VIP customer's called in, and you didn't answer their call. We can customize that adaptive card and send it in Teams. So again, it comes back to keeping everything in one place. So you're getting all of that information in Microsoft Teams.
And without going too much further into it, but it's Power Automate, so it's a logical if and or flow. You can effectively create any number of scenarios by using that, which often businesses now have in-house skills for as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're using Microsoft Power Automate. So we're keeping all of those technologies in the Microsoft ecosystem, and I think that's really where you guys can really help. So Formation and their team can sit with you and see, okay, what's the end-to-end business flow that you want to achieve, and then help you design that.
Fantastic. The call recording question was, I think Mike, you've answered that. It was, we have call recording. Can you do that? Yes, lots of options there. We can cover that separately, maybe have a follow-up. But yes, call recording is absolutely an option for this. So yeah, so in terms of next section, call reporting, we sort of broadly touched upon the use of that in a few of the use cases we talked about. Starting with you, Mike, in native terms, and I guess probably worth touching on what we see as reporting light, or what we talk about contact center light. Right now, we're talking about very advanced features. There is a sort of middle ground, not for necessarily today's session, but for those who look at this and say, actually, I don't need quite as much of that. I need something in between what Microsoft is natively and what we're talking about today. But very high level, what is standard? What's in between? What we can do with Luware, and what are use cases?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges, whilst Teams gives you all of this data, it's not all in one place. It's not all presented in the same way. So you might be reaching into different sections of the Teams admin center, or going to a unsupported Microsoft provided Power BI report tool to pull in the information you want. And if you maybe don't have the necessary Power BI skills to sort of manipulate that to get what you want, can be a bit of a challenge, and it's workload and time, etc. So what we've got is our Teams reporting platform, which gives you the non-real-time kind of metrics that you might. So this is kind of after the event. So what is my call performance last month? Who made the most calls? What is our answer time? All those kind of metrics. So these are really important. They may not be as advanced and as capable as what we're talking about today, but if you're really interested in just historic performance, and you want to run the schedule reports for the management meeting, then absolutely there is a tool for you. But today with Ollie, or the reporting capability and the real-time information you're getting with the Nimbus platform vastly exceeds that. But there is that kind of middle ground, so it is covered as well. So if you need that, come talk to us.
And one step back from that, for the sort of Power BI fans and those who like crunching through data, Graph API.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you can pull out that raw data. But what we're saying is that you don't have to do that effort, that someone's already solved that problem for you, and you can just consume it essentially.
Yeah, fantastic. So Ollie, the more real-time advanced reporting, why are people using it? How are you guys approaching that in the market? And perhaps over on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for a while now, the reason that a lot of our customers are coming to us is for that real time visibility. So essentially, I think the question we're trying to answer is, do we have enough people right now available to handle the current call demand or the current call volumes? So what we want to do is give you some really nice out of the box dashboards which show you exactly what's happening in your queue. So okay, how many callers do you have waiting? What the longest waiting time is? Are there people in the IVR? How many calls are connected to which agents? And then in the same dashboard, directly compare that to our agent availability. And because we're all of our agents, or sorry, all of our users are in Teams, just because they're logged into our call queue doesn't actually mean they're available in Teams. So what we're going to do is look at their Teams presence. Okay, so we're going to see, okay, are they logged into the queue and are they available in Teams? And if only those are matched, then they're available to take a call. So you might have 5 people logged into the queue, but 3 of them might be on Teams calls, some of them might be on Teams meetings, and some of them might be offline. Okay, so you can directly compare how many people you have available to that current call demand, but also go a step further than that. And if you have the right permissions, so this is where we come back to providing kind of supervisor admin permissions, actually log users in and out of queues to make them available. So if we see that Mike is actually green on Teams, but he's logged out of our queue and we have 5 people waiting in the queue, we can just log Mike in, even though he wasn't logged in before, and make that change in real time based on the data.
And this kind of overlaps into the sort of efficiency section as well, because setting those users up in those groups is very much tied into the sort of AD security group elements of Microsoft in itself. So do you want to perhaps going back a step, how those users are put into those groups in the first place?
Yeah, so with our routing licenses, and we'll maybe cover a bit more about what that means later, but with those routing licenses, we manage those groups via Teams channels. So for us, that was the most logical way to manage a group of users. So that's how Teams essentially manages users, is via Teams channels. So we essentially attach the call queue or the Nimbus service to the Teams channel. And then if you want to add or remove a user from that call queue, all you have to do is add or remove them from the Teams channel. So again, you're not having to go to some sort of external admin portal. You can literally just add or remove them from the Teams channel in a couple of clicks, and that all remains in Teams.
Fantastic. And so contact center, there's a lot of stuff we've talked about which are contact center like features, and in fact some of these have spanned very much into that. But when you're really going into contact center grown up sort of advanced routing, what's the difference between that and perhaps just taking a group call, or something that's routing on a profile such as a time or such, like perhaps just maybe touch on that a little bit more detail.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a kind of question we often get, and I think contact center can be perceived as kind of a bit too complex, a bit too expensive for some customers. So we very much want to provide that informal licensing model and the more formal contact center model. But I think the key difference for us is, as you mentioned, Mark, is when you actually look at the routing, do you just want to route a call amongst a group of 10 users, maybe longest idle, or ring everyone at the same time? Or do you actually want to route that call a bit more intelligently? So a couple of ways to route that call a bit more intelligently would be things like skill-based distribution. So we want to target certain users first because maybe they speak the language better, or they have a higher knowledge in a certain area, or maybe they're just more experienced. Or we want to route based on profiles. So we want to find people who are in a first line profile first, and then some back office engineers are logged into a second line profile. So they'll only be distributed the call if nobody in that first line profile is available. And then we can also think about other ways to route the calls. So if you want to try and maintain that consistency in engagement, we can do things like last user routing. So if I spoke to Mike 3 times in the last 2 days, then if I ring in again within the same day or the next day, the chances are that I'm going to get a better conversation if I speak to Mike again, because he already has the knowledge on the case. So we can basically say we want to target Mike if he's available first, because we know that person spoke to him within the last 48 hours or the last week or whatever it might be. And then taking that step further, we can do things like what we call preferred user routing. So if I call in, I'm going to be immediately routed to my account manager or my customer success manager first, and then if they're not available, routed to the wider queue. So I think it's important for businesses to think about, okay, if they route a call in, are you okay with just anybody answering it, or actually are you going to derive more value from certain people with better skills or better knowledge on the account answering those calls?
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess we talked about reporting a moment ago, so that real-time information is really important. We also talked about the kind of the contact center light, or the sort of more informal. You can obviously do both of those things, and cradle to grave, I think understanding where a call has come from, how well it's performing, is also equally important. If you've got some perhaps use cases that line with that narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. So a dashboard we just released recently essentially has every single session, we called it, but essentially if you're just taking calls, that can be every single call record. And we can add filters to that. So let's say, for example, you just want to pick out at every lunchtime, you just want to find the people that hung up in the queue or an abandoned call. So we can just add some filters really quickly into all of those sessions and filter out all of those ones that have hung up in the queue, and maybe just give them a manual call back. Or if somebody calls in and complains, your top customer calls in and complains, oh, I rang 5 times today and I couldn't get hold of anybody. Well, we can really easily just search their phone number that they called from and see how many times they called, see how long they waited for in the queue. If it was distributed to some users and they didn't answer, we can see it rang on Mike's phone for 20 seconds and then he didn't answer it, and then it rang on Mark's phone and he did answer it. So yeah, we want to provide that complete visibility of every call, but also give it in a way that you can add filters to it and find the information quickly that you need.
Fantastic. We're 2 minutes off the halfway mark, and it's flown by. And I hope for the people joining, it's been a useful session. We've covered some native Teams experience, some of the enhanced pieces today. Covered lots of use cases. We'll be organising some follow-up demos in the different sections of your account management. Get in touch if that's of interest to you. If there's any questions, please do ask them. We've managed to also have a whole webinar here and not talk about AI at all, which is unusual in today's technology environment. I always like to finish these sessions as well of like what's coming, and AI is talked about invariably in lots of cases. In some cases, is it really solving a problem, or is it just a bit of noise? I think there's some really interesting stuff coming through this space. So I mean, Mike, to you first. Stuff in the future, things that's coming. AI doesn't have to be AI, of course, but where are we going? What things coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone who's been in the Microsoft space might have heard of this little thing called Copilot, and it's Copilot for almost everything in the Microsoft space. So, Microsoft 365 Copilot is very much in the public domain now. It's come out of preview. So anyone can buy it and any number of licenses as well. And, what's coming on the horizon is sort of role-specific Copilot for service and sales teams, giving dedicated kind of capabilities or enhanced capabilities in terms of those specific roles to sort of enhance your sales performance and your service performance, which essentially allows your sales teams to perform better and your service teams to perform better as well.
Great, very good. Ollie, from yourself?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. So it's debatable whether this is AI. I'd say probably not, but we've already got transcription available within the platform. So what we can do is we can use tools like Power Automate and Azure AI to actually take keywords from calls and then make trigger actions from those. So let's say, for example, somebody wants to cancel their contract. We can basically be looking out for some of those keywords and then create triggers like adaptive cards or emails to management when those keywords or when those phrases are mentioned. So that's something we can do right now. So again, it depends on the use case, but that's worth discussing if you think some of that can be automated based on the conversations you're having. And then in the future, we're also building voice bots. So I think the first thing to say about AI when it comes to voice or kind of contact center is I would really highly recommend you get the routing and the reporting set up first. And then once that's set up, take a step back and think, okay, is there anything here that can be automated better? And then we can start looking at using voice bots to answer some of those mundane, repetitive questions. But obviously that opens up a lot of questions around kind of data sovereignty and security. So it's probably, it's a bigger project, but the tools will be there to do it. But it's probably a bit of an undertaking.
Very good. Well, thank you again, Ollie, for joining today. Mike, thank you as well. Any questions from
Pleasure.
the floor, please do ask them. Of course, your account managers will be in touch as well. And, you know, as a follow-on, we've historically done IVR sessions, tenant consult sessions, and CRM straight contact center sessions. So we'll send out some information around those. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate spending half an hour a day with us today. Hopefully we'll get to meet you more if you're a new customer and spend more time with your existing. I've got a question coming actually here. Could you summarize a transcription in a couple of sentences and store it against all calls to tell you what the call is about? Ollie, is that perhaps a question for you?
Yeah, absolutely, Nigel. So as part of the transcription connector in Power Automate, you can use Azure AI to summarize the transcription. So we can then take that summary and put it into a call record in the CRM, for example. So we've actually got an example where we summarize the transcription of a call and then put it into a Salesforce call record. So but then without having to read that full transcription, you've got the summary in a useful place against the call record. So if there's other places, then we can put it there, but we can also put it in the CRM, or we could send it out via email or wherever you wanted to put that. But yeah, we can use Azure AI to summarize the transcription.
Nigel, we'll have one of the team follow up with you on that. So I'm glad that's broadly what you're looking for, and we can perhaps demonstrate that and see if it meets the need. So please, any other questions for anyone else on the floor? As I say, well, look, thank you again. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you again soon. And please do ask any questions. Retrospectively, we'll be back in touch as well. But again, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.